Hello and welcome to Liverpool News Daily. I'm your host, David Comerford, and I'm joined by Emmet Gates as we briefly reflect on the defeat against Wolves on Saturday. And then we've also got a line on Jame Milner to discuss this morning. But like I said, Emmet, let's return, as we must, unfortunately, to the game at Molineux at the weekend. Liverpool obviously losing that one 3-0. And Klopp saying after the game that, he is obviously deeply concerned by what's going on. It's hard to have any sort of optimism off the back of that, I suppose. But how bad do you think it could get in terms of league position for Liverpool this season? Because we don't want to be sort of too dramatic, I suppose, in the aftermath of a game like that. But also, there's no denying right now that Liverpool still winless in 2023. I think maybe bottom of the Premier League for form in that period as well. There's no denying that it is, like Klopp says, deeply worrying at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one, Dave, because on the one hand, it's difficult right now to be optimistic, but on the other hand, you don't want to be too pessimistic and say, they're going to finish, further down the table. But if you're being realistic about it, we could be looking at a mid-table finish here. Like, not even fighting for Europa League places. It could be anywhere between 10th and 13th place, given current form. Um, it is kind of hard to find any optimism at the moment, as you say, winless in 2023 in the league. I think only one win in all competitions, and that was against Wolves in the FA Cup third round replay. So there's definitely an air of negativism or negativity, shall we say, about the club at the moment. But yeah, it's at the moment you would say definitely a bottom half of the table finish. Unless there's a rousing end of the season. Where Liverpool could put together 3, 4, 5, 6 wins and hope that the other teams around them, slip up. But a month ago you were saying make the top 4, and that's a good finish to the season, given how the season had went up until that point. Now you're thinking if they finish in the top 8, that's still a good season. So the objectives are changing all the time. But at the moment, you'd say Liverpool are playing like a mid-table team. So if Liverpool finished anywhere between 12th to 13th, it really wouldn't surprise you given how they're playing at the moment.
Yeah, they look like a mid-table side, certainly in terms of this is almost a run that a mid-table team would endure during the season. Um, on that whole sort of finishing position argument, some people have said that if it isn't going to be Champions League, they'd rather have no European football at all. So they'd rather basically, if they're not going to come forward, they'd rather be sort of 8th, 9th, whatever that might entail. Obviously, that would be. I mean, it's looking this way regardless, but it's looking like Liverpool's sort of point swing is going to be one of the biggest in Premier League history in terms of getting. I think it was 91 last season, and then obviously fallen way back from that this year. So, putting aside, I suppose, the extent of the collapse, and it is quite historic. Do you see any sort of benefits to coming lower down the table as opposed to in that top 4? I mean, it's almost a desperate way to find the positive, really, in something very bleak. But where do you sort of stand on that?
Yeah, I mean, people have a love-hate attitude of the Europa League. To a lot of people, it's a nuisance. Playing Thursday, playing Sunday. People don't really get into it until you maybe get to that quarter-final, round of 16, quarter-final, semi-final stage. Then it's like, oh yeah, right, let's go for this. From a monetary perspective, there's nothing to be gained really from entering the Europa League and taking it seriously and going far. Because I mean, in terms of the money between the Europa League and the Champions League is like night and day. I think even if you go all the way, you maybe get 20 million, 25 million. Whereas, you get that just for entering the Champions League. And even if you're in the group stage and you lose every single match, you still walk away with more money than winning the Europa League. So I can see from a monetary standpoint and just more of a nuisance standpoint, I can see why fans don't like it. But at the same time, it's Europe, and I think it's better to be in it than not in it. But I can also see from the other side, it's like, right, you come 8th for 9th, you completely reboot the team in the summer, and it's one less competition to worry about. Obviously, in English football, you've got the 2 domestic cup competitions as well as the Premier League. So again, squads are stretched automatically compared to, say, La Liga or Serie A, Bundesliga. There's only one cup competition. So the Europa League isn't that much of a burden for some, for teams in other countries, but for English sides, it's a fourth competition to enter. But I can't see the argument in that finish 8th or 9th, don't qualify for it, and then you just concentrate on the 3 tournaments next season. But to me, it's Europe, and you still like to be in it, even if it is, the secondary tier competition. But I can't see the argument, to finish 9th, and then that's it, just completely reboot and go again next year. But yeah, as you say, the point swing from, May 2022 to now, or, even by the end of the season, it's incredible. And at this point, Liverpool have conceded more goals than they did in the entirety of last season in the league. By +2, it's mad, the complete. I wouldn't say, but you could say collapse, maybe. The complete collapse of Liverpool, and then it's ironic too in the way that City's also kind of they're tailing off too at the same point. Liverpool are tailing off, and if this City had been last season, Liverpool would have won the league. But because Liverpool were going full tilt and they were playing City full tilt, both teams have kind of felt the effects of that, and they're not clearly not the same this season. But it's just it's ironic in a way that pity City's tail off hadn't been last season when Liverpool were at their best, and they would have Klopp would have got another league title. So it's funny just how things work out.
I think on the sort of on the Europa issue, first of all, I think I see what you mean in terms of from kind of a prestige point of view and almost the reputation of the club. You do want to be in Europe in some capacity, but equally playing those kind of Thursday night matches, especially the ones that are against kind of relatively unknown teams, isn't particularly kind of like satisfying. And I think it's a bit of a balancing act in that regard. I think my approach to it would be, if we do end up in there, try and just use it constructively rather than viewing it as a kind of a drain on us or just an obligation, because you can just use it to maybe bed young players in the group stage or things like that. You don't necessarily have to allow it to disrupt you too much, as much as there are obviously advantages to that kind of free week. But seeing as you mentioned it there, before we come on to Milner, we'll just touch on that City result yesterday. So obviously they lost their opportunity to close the gap on Arsenal following Arsenal's defeat at Everton. And again, I think I saw a tweet yesterday that said they were only on course to get 81 points this season. So I suppose on one level, it's painful for Liverpool fans because, for years City have been at this sort of unbelievable record-breaking pace, and now they've dropped off. But on another level, it also shows maybe just how good and how fierce and that Liverpool team was, in the sense that they drove City to these incredible heights, and now that City don't have Liverpool to drive them, they've clearly taken their foot off the gas.
Yeah, I know, and it is kind of sad in a way that the fact that both their declines have come in the same season. If it had been said, like I said, if it had been City last year, the way Liverpool were playing, they would arguably they would have won the league. And you're seeing it now with Arsenal. Or I mean, it's only February, so it's difficult to say if they're going to win the league. But the fact that Arsenal's top, and I don't think, with all due respect, that the Arsenal side that's top of the league now is as good as the Liverpool side that we saw last season. So it's just a bad timing in the sense that both City and Liverpool are declining at the same time. If it had been City last year, Liverpool would have won the league, and maybe this season wouldn't have been as bad. The hangover mightn't have been as severe had Liverpool, won a treble and out of the league onto the Carabao Cup and the FA Cup. But that's just the way of football, the nature of top level football, I suppose.
Yeah, I think the psychological aspect of the way it ended last season has played a huge part really in how it's gone this season. So I think it would have been different. But like I say, let's touch on this interesting piece of information we got about Jame Milner. So the Leeds manager, Jesse Marsch, has basically said that he had the opportunity to bring Milner back to the club last summer. Obviously, he signed a 1-year deal at Liverpool instead. And there has been talk for a long, long time about Milner going back to Leeds, obviously where he started off. Is that a case of maybe Milner not being necessarily fit for a very high intensity style of football. I think Leeds are the team who sort of pressed the most in the whole Premier League. So should Liverpool almost take that as a sign to not extend Milner's contract themselves if Marsch doesn't necessarily think he can drive it at this age in a system that does, like you say, demand completely tireless running and energy.
Yeah, I think you're right, Dave. I think the way you would read into that is essentially that he doesn't think Milner. Milner is obviously clearly one that still keeps himself in incredible shape and is one of the fittest players in Liverpool. But there's a difference between being fit and being physically able to do sprints over a sustained period of time. And the way Jesse Marsch's Leeds side he obviously needs players that are in their early to mid 20s and not late to mid to late 30s. And Milner could definitely do a shift. And I think in the sense that Jurgen Klopp, you would say, arguably kept him on, given that 1 year extension, probably just for dressing room morale rather than really, his performances on the pitch. Because even last season, he wasn't really. He's a diligent servant, Milner, but his performances last season really didn't warrant an extension. But I think it's more just for the dressing room and his leadership qualities off the pitch as opposed to on it. And the fact that Jesse Marsch maybe had the chance to bring him back to Leeds where he started his career 20 years ago and didn't, kind of is indicative of where Milner is and kind of not where Liverpool are in the sense, but maybe there was a bit of sentimentality came into the decision, and I think it was renewing Milner's contract was more about what he can provide off the pitch as opposed to on it. So yeah, it's interesting that the fact that Leeds did turn him down, but I can see why, because their super intensity style of play really doesn't fit in with where Milner is in his career.
Yeah, I think I could completely agree with all of that, and that'll wrap us up for the stream this morning. So thanks very much for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow at the same time for another Liverpool News Daily stream. In the meantime, remember to check out all the written content that goes up on liverpool.com. But yeah, like I say, we'll see you then and enjoy the rest of your day.